All right, so welcome back to another episode of the Chaim Davies Show, and today on our exploratory conversation series, it's really coming somewhat of a series already.
Wow.
We have my great friend Maxx Blank from Columbus, Ohio. Coincidence that you're available in Columbus?
Wow.
To come on the show. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell us all a little bit about where you're from? You are a Columbus original, right? One of the few that's here from the beginning. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so grew up here in Bexley. Went throughout elementary school in Bexley, high school in Bexley. Youngest of 4 kids. Jewish, obviously, very connected culturally, but grew up more non-affiliated per se. Went through the Bexley system, and then on to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, where we had a good time down there.
Wow.
College town. I was in AE Pi.
Wow.
It was a good time. And then my senior year of that experience, or really my 5th year, I took an extra lap around.
Right. Taking your time, taking your sweet time.
After that, I went to Israel on a 3-week Aish trip.
So how did you end up on that trip?
Okay, it's a bit of a story, but I guess
you can give us a synopsis.
Okay.
I mean, you must have known somebody involved with
Sure.
Aish or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I'll break it down. So throughout college, I wasn't so inspired about what I was studying in college. I had a good time in college. Wasn't until my senior year that through a roommate in AE Pi, I was living in the frat house, connected me with a gentleman who was at Aish Jerusalem, and he was launching a business on college campuses.
Wow.
And it was a Groupon. Remember Groupon back then? It was like the hottest thing.
And you were already somewhat of an entrepreneur
Not
at this
so
time.
much. I mean, I was inspired by it, but I wasn't so much into the startup-y sort of entrepreneurial game, right?
Right.
It wasn't until I was connected to this gentleman, Binyamin, as this Binyamin Klayman, a good friend of mine still to this day, that he connected me to an opportunity he had. And he and his friend were at Aish Torah in Jerusalem, and they would learn all day Torah. At this time, I didn't really know what the differences were between Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew kosher and Shabbos, but I didn't really know.
What's there to learn all day in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I'm like, what are you guys praying all day? Like, I didn't know what it was,
Sure.
So they had this opportunity where they're going to launch it, and it was a daily deal site that was for college kids around their campuses. And so the test ground was Athens, Ohio, Ohio University, classic college town.
Wow.
Classic, like, straight college economy. Like, there was really nothing else in this town except for the university.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing, but they're like, just Google it, Google sales, figure out how to do it. And I just hit the ground running. I felt very inspired by the idea and the premise. And I saw Groupon was like starting to become very popular. This was very close to that. So I started going. I just kind of, you mess up, you try things, you mess things up.
Right.
You make relationships, you start to learn how to communicate very well. I started approaching businesses on campus to sign up to give us a daily deal.
Wow.
So we hit up all of the cafes around campus, the restaurants.
Incredible.
You couldn't really do alcohol or bars or anything like that because you can't do that online. And then we built a little sales team with my fraternity brothers, and then I had another very good friend at the time who we both hit the ground running on this thing. That was Zach Sebo from Cleveland. And during that experience, I'm like, sort of like unlocking new zones in my brain. I'm like, I didn't realize I could do this stuff. And here I'm pushing myself. I felt very motivated.
Right. And it's like, what else?
And it sort of activated a new world for me.
An interest.
Yeah.
Looking for more.
Also, there's a lot of power that I saw from starting something from nothing, right? When you see something that is like just an idea and then it becomes something, it was extremely motivating.
Wow. And so the same guy who brought you into startups also kind of brought you to Israel.
100%, yeah.
Wow. So at what point along that storyline did you end up going to Israel for those 3 weeks?
Yeah, so this is like a year and a half before I went to Israel, okay?
Right, wow.
So throughout this experience, we had started working with, we started getting traction with the business. I mean, we were able to get on, like a third of the whole campus onto our lists.
Wow.
And like, we started selling a lot of these daily deals. And then we leaned back into our networks through AE Pi fraternity and started spreading it to different campuses around the country in Ohio. Started to get, very interesting, very cool. We built the whole team on the ground. We had, marketing and sales, and we were just running it out of our frat house and really had zero experience with this thing, and it started to get really exciting. And then at some point, that project just kind of it starts to fall apart after a while. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't hit critical, what do you call it? Like scale and just, we were very young. We didn't know what we were doing so much. So there's other things, when it comes to actually running a business that maybe we lacked that kind of didn't let us to go to that next step. But nonetheless, it was extremely exciting. And when that thing started to wind down, we had a little bit of money left in the bank account. So I went on this trip to New York City.
Wow.
Through Aish Torah. They had this enterprise trip where they take young Jewish kids, Jewish college kids, and they take you to New York City for 10 days, and you stay in Passaic, New Jersey. And the whole entire thing is based around making connections and being exposed to the business world through the lens of more religious folks.
That's incredible.
So
I didn't even know a program like that existed.
It was actually amazing.
That's amazing. I mean, because it's a growing number of young Jews who are exactly fitting that description. Yeah. And it's a great way of making, as you say, like world connections, really just building a network within the Jewish world and presented within that context. It's a great way of reaching people on the level, where they're interested.
And the guys that went on the trip, like the other participants, we were all coming from universities. We had not so much of a connection to Torah Judaism, per se, right? So there was definitely an agenda for us to connect with these business leaders in the framework of Torah Judaism, Orthodoxy, Shabbos, Kashrus, and then learning as well. Yeah. So for 10 days, we met with very impressive individuals, from hedge fund managers to people, executives in Bloomberg, to big fancy marketing companies. The whole thing was very impressive, and you had like a competition at the end where you pitched a business that you created to these guys. It was just very exciting. And if you won that competition, you got to go to Israel. But anyways, during that trip, we got exposed to these business leaders that were Orthodox Jewish guys, like Payas, stuff like that, Hasidic guys. And I had a paradigm shift during that whole trip, because my perspective on religious Judaism was like, oh, that is archaic, and that's something for like Bubby and Zeta from like back in the day. And like, there's no real practicality to that in a modern world. Right. But I learned very quickly on that trip that's not true at all. Right. And that's more of like almost like an anti-religious narrative that I had sort of been exposed to growing up. Not from anyone in particular, but that's just kind of like the mainstream sort of secular culture. You don't need religion anymore, right?
So this was maybe the first step in that major paradigm shift, realizing like, wait, there are Orthodox, there are committed Jews.
Not to mention
who live in this contemporary sphere, and somehow there's a connection between what you had once seen as being incompatible was now all of a sudden like
very compatible,
very compelling,
right?
And they seemed to be happy while they were doing it.
Extremely happy. In fact, so that was the major paradigm shift. Before that, when I was with that startup business in college, I had started learning with like Benjamin, who was the guy who brought me in, my good friend, and a few other people who were in that circle when we were building that company. There were other guys that were also religious. I started learning, but I didn't have that click until I went to New York City, and I saw like firsthand there are these guys that like very successful, healthy marriages, lots of kids, proud to be Jewish, supporters of Israel, and it was extremely compelling. And that was the first time I kept Shabbat. Wow, it was amazing. Wow, we stayed in this house in Passaic, New Jersey, and we just had a beautiful Shabbos meal, and it was the first time. So this is probably 11 years ago, I want to say. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and that was a game-changing trip. So at that point, you went to Israel, and you spent 3 weeks, and that changed everything.
So we ended up, I think we came in second place in that competition, that I was speaking about. And with that, we got to go to Israel,
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's all
expense paid trip.
Yes. I think I had to pay like $300 or something. Right. So I was 20, I think it was like a few days after my 21st birthday. I got to Israel, and you land, right? I had been to Israel many times throughout college. I went on Birthright. Birthright is like when you start to sort of open your eyes up a little bit. You see like the things you were taught in Sunday school, and now you see them like in society in Israel, and it's mind-blowing to see that experience there.
But that itself didn't trigger a major change for you.
No, it gave me more of like a Zionistic pride, which is great as well. But it wasn't until I started to like, really get exposed to the lifestyle of religious Judaism that I had. Right. So I get off the plane, we take the Sherut to the old city of Jerusalem, walk through the gates. I was with one of my good friends at the time, walk through the gates of Shar Yafo, right, down to Aish Torah, move in. It's like a dorm room, sort of like post-college, interesting vibe,
young adults,
just figuring out life, you know. And started going to these classes there that were very empowering, from innovation to the Jewish contribution to the world. And you really see that in the Jewish people, in the Torah, we have like the foundations of the Western world and the world in general. And it's just unbelievable to see, to draw back to the roots of that and to see like the foundations and then everything that's been built on top of them that have gotten us to like where we are today. Right. Some things are better than better or worse, whatever it may be in terms of society and culture. But started learning more about kashrus, learning more about what halacha is, Jewish law, what Shabbos is, what is the meaning of relationships, what is love, all these things that you're raised on, but you don't necessarily question them.
Yeah, or recognize the significance or the meaning that's in any of these things.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, Rabbi Sachs writes about so beautifully. I'm reading through his amazing book, A Letter in the Scroll, right now, which is like, everyone recommends it as like his landmark book about Jewish identity. And he writes a lot about how like there are so many aspects within Judaism which at the time of their presentation to the world were utter world revolutions. The concept that mankind is created in the image of God, that argued against like all of the conventions of the way that the meaning of the world, the cosmology, was understood throughout all of history. Because all of these, the mythos of the family of gods and the fights that are going on, for the first time to talk about like, no, there's something unique, there's something unifying and singular and eternal about the Creator, and He made the world with personality and with love, and there's so many ideas that Judaism has, and when you grow up, either whether on the inside or out, it's very easy to be missing the experience, the significance of these things, and you just view them as rituals. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do, and nobody ever explains to you, because we live in a world that's already been shaped by 3,000 years of this contribution. Right. So now we could be, we wonder like, well, what's the significance of family, the family unit? Why is it so important? Why is education? Like everybody educates. The Torah provided these things like millennia in advance, and people can feel unfortunately empty, all too often, whether they're performing the mitzvot or not, because they view them as archaic, or they view them as without a clear
they don't even know what they are.
What they even are, right? Yeah. It's some sort of dietary laws, or you got to stop driving your car on Shabbos. Like that's not what Shabbos is about at all. Right? It doesn't even register in my mind as having to do with Shabbos. Sure. Yeah, it's an expression of a malacha, but there's so much there. So in Aish, right, which was founded by the great Rav Noach Weinberg of blessed memory, he was already passed when you got there, right? 11 years ago. Yeah. I think he died in 2006. But he built an institution like Aish Torah, which has, for generations now already, right, a number of decades, been pumping out relevant and meaningful and cogent information about Judaism, about
and reaching Torah out and reaching out to people that were never really affiliated.
Basically, founding the whole idea of outreach within Judaism today. Obviously in parallel with everything that Chabad has done, in incredible ways around the world, truly revolutionized, what a shul is and what communal influence is and what the impact that every individual can make. Obviously, it goes without saying that those have been the major players in Jewish outreach in the past 50 years or so. But so Rav Noach created this place where, as you said, you come in and it's people just trying to figure out their lives. Right? Just asking real questions and receiving real answers.
And it's also post-college. Well, a lot of guys were post-college.
So the maturity level's a little higher.
Maybe.
Not guaranteed.
I think the point I'm trying to drive home with that comment is like, before you take off, right? Get career, the normal things.
You settle in.
You have a chance to start to question things before you sort of plot the course for the rest of your life, which is very important. So, and what a better place to sort of question everything in Judaism, but in the old city across from the Kotel.
The place it all started.
Right, and in this little incubator for Judaism, in a sense, right? The old city, Aish Torah. I had guys that were just like me there, and that sort of that camaraderie and that experience and the connections you make with people, and having Shabbos meals and all over Jerusalem and that exploring Israel was like unbelievable.
It's immersive, right? And that concept itself is not even unique to this experience as far as Judaism goes, right? Everybody knows that you could read a Tony Robbins self-help book, you could read Stephen Covey, but when you go to the seminar, when you're there for that 3-day immersion, I mean, everybody knows that's what's transformative. The books are in one ear out the other.
Right. A lot of the, you said Tony Robbins, so it just immediately reminds me of just like the self-help industry. Yeah. And just like the personal betterment and well-being. A lot of stuff is inside already Torah. And
Yeah.
that was amazing to me. I'm going there, I'm hearing things that are very similar to mainstream sort of like self-help and wellness things, which I was like, where did that come from? And then you start to realize, you start to peel back the layers of a lot of the institutions in the Western world. A lot of it is built on
Judaic
values, which is pretty inspiring. So it's just empowering as a Jewish guy who was never so connected to get reconnected, and then to start to shape the future of my life on that foundation.
While being informed by those.
So I spent, I want to say, like a year and a half full time there.
Wow.
And then, actually, I met my soon-to-be wife like right when like 3 months when I got there, and she was doing a similar thing, but with the female version of.
She was in the female age.
She was at Neve.
She was at Neve. Right. Beautiful.
Right. And so we both sort of having very similar experiences. I mean, she came from an Israeli family, so they were.
And Neve is also an age-old institution in Jerusalem the thousands of alumni who have gone through Neve. And, I have a first cousin who's a Neve graduate, spent many years there. And they build a tremendously strong foundation.
Yeah.
So your wife was also there for around the same amount of time?
Well, she had more of a background than I did. Her family was Israeli. She had, she went to a day school and a yeshiva high school in New York. She was surrounded by that. Mm-hmm. She grew up going to Israel all the summers, right? So she had way more of a background than I did.
Right.
But nonetheless,
the dissonance was the same, though, right? The viewing the mitzvot, the commandments.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely.
Is this me? Is this my life?
I don't want to speak for her, 100% here, but I know that period of time when she came to Israel, she really got to know more about Judaism, and we connected. Yeah. And we started dating, and we took a very much like a longer route. So she went back to finish her degree. I stayed, and I was at age, like I mentioned, a year and a half. She had gone back, I think like maybe 7 months in, to finish her degree. Mm-hmm. I at one point made Aliyah from within Israel.
Wow.
And then like a few months after that, I was recruited into the army, which I spent a little bit of time in the army.
Yeah.
And then after the army, I went back to Aish, and I think for about 4 months. She had come back to Yerushalayim. I think she went to Sha'arim. She switched to Sha'arim. Mm-hmm. And after a few months of us like learning post-army and post her coming back, we got married in Jerusalem, and like all of our families came, and it was my siblings, and my brother came for like 3 weeks.
Look at that Shivat Zion, the return of the Jewish people to Zion, right? I mean, we pray for it every day. Can you imagine, just for a second, like the amount of historical trends it took to get this family, right, this young boy from Columbus, Ohio, to end up in Jerusalem with just this woman who would end up being like, his other half, and to unify in Jerusalem, of all places, after 2,000 years of exile. It's really like the most remarkable story. The Jewish people, I mean, Mikam,
it's amazing,
Israel.
Yeah.
So you married in Israel, and you stayed there.
We were there. We moved to French Hill, which is a train ride away from the old city. After we got married, so I was still learning at Aish like part-time for about 3 or 4 more months, and then I was also working. So
what were you doing?
I was, I'm very much, ever since that whole startup thing in the end of college, I just said I'm going to keep sticking with the startup thing. It's exciting, and if you hit it, you can hit it,
Yeah.
And I was very into like the whole notion of the startup nation, Israel, all the tech companies there, all the innovation, Tel Aviv, right? It was very exciting, very cool, mind-blowing stuff going on there in terms of technology.
And Israel's a great place for entrepreneurship.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton going on there.
For sure, yeah. So I had connected with an Aish rabbi who was like one of the first guys to really create the concept of bringing students to Israel and touring and mixing in outreach and things like that.
Yeah.
And he had this idea, and obviously I loved it, and you'll hear why. The idea was to take the Israeli innovation and create sort of like that enterprise trip that I had mentioned in New York City, but to do that in Israel. And so I started working for him, and we created this program together called Bizrael. Then I brought a friend on to help as well. And we basically made a network of a lot of the top venture funds there and a lot of the top startups. It's like Wix, remember Waze? Remember Waze?
Sure.
I remember we had, so we started bringing groups of kids and universities. I think we brought a couple thousand kids on these trips.
That's unbelievable.
I think I did that for about like a year and a half full time.
That's an unbelievable turnover, right? Because like you showed up in Israel, like a grand total of at this point 3 years ago.
We did a lot. I did a lot in that time span. Like
I'm saying, but that's like a crazy little detail. Like that's a little footnote. But that's a huge story.
It was amazing, right?
Thousands of kids experiencing Israel, meeting with like high-level entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That's pretty momentous achievement.
It was pretty amazing. And the Aish rabbi, his name is Hanan Kaufman. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I learned a ton from him. He already had this infrastructure of bringing a touring company that specialized in these educational trips.
Yeah.
So he had this infrastructure built up.
So it was about leveraging that towards business.
And then all I did, and he had a few connections in the business world as well, in Israel. So I just hit those connections, and you can reach anybody in Israel. It's wild. Just emails. And you tell them we're bringing students. It's good for Israel. Hasbara. And people are like, yeah, bring them by. And so I was able to connect with so many of these companies, and it was amazing. I mean, one time we had lunch with the CEO of Waze on the day a few days before they were about to announce the purchase from Google, and it was unbelievable. It's pretty amazing. That's why I met AJ on that whole.
Those of you who watched our previous episode, you know all about AJ now. And there's a little connection going on over there. That's a little bit of a separate story. Maybe we'll have the two of you guys on to discuss how the two of you ended up in Columbus, Ohio, of all crazy things. But one thing that I want to ask you about this, because it's been now a couple of years. You've been on this progress, and you've been in Aish, you've been outside of Aish. You're interfacing with a broad Jewish community in Israel. Were there any moments of disillusionment about Orthodox Judaism, because you had come from a secular upbringing, you get brought into through outreach, and you're brought into the core of religious thinking and honest inquiry, and you commit your life to that. You get married, you serve for the country. There's an incredible amount of investment in the infrastructure of the country, and over that time you're meeting more and more Orthodox people.
Sure.
Is there any point that you maybe something that you originally thought about Orthodoxy you saw actually it's a little bit less black and white than that? What do you have in mind?
I mean,
black and white. No, that pun wasn't even intended.
Yeah. I don't know if it's disillusionment. I'm not sure the right word for it, but I think when you see a new culture, it's very exciting. No matter what it is, there's an excitement to it.
Right.
It's sort of like a honeymoon phase. You get into it, right? And as you learn more and more, the honeymoon phase wears off like anything. And then you have to your commitment and dedication to the truth, the new discovered truth.
Yeah.
You have to work hard for it, like everything, right? So once that honeymoon phase wears off of, this new lifestyle that I had committed to, and it does wear off, and you realize that we're all just people, and we have our problems, and we have, our bickering and our infighting and things like this. And you realize that at the end of the day, we're just people trying to do the right thing. And so I guess where I'm at is that, the honeymoon phase will wear off. And
so what happened was, I guess you're saying that, along that journey, you realize, okay, there comes a point where you have to be committed to truth for truth's sake.
Exactly.
Right? It can't be about this, the honeymoon feeling and the vibes of love. Those are important, and we always want to try to recreate the honeymoon stage in our marriages, in our relationships. We want to keep it fresh and young and passionate.
You have to dedicate,
be underneath all of that, the foundation upon which any of that exists is that undying commitment. Whether I'm feeling that honeymoon vibe or not, we're still married, right? We're still committed. We're still building something together.
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely... what's the word I'm looking for here? Intimidating. I knew olive base when I went there, you know, and to catch up to the greater Orthodox community, whether it's in Israel, which is very hard, but even over here, Columbus happens to be a great place because there's a lot of support and there's a lot of. It's not a big place, and so
it's also a well-balanced mix of people at different levels and different comforts.
Yeah, so. Definitely there's an intimidation of having to want to fit in if you're in a big community for sure, right? And
a very monolithic community, maybe more to the right.
Sure. So that pressure is
So did you feel that pressure as you were getting married, settling in, and now you're going to be a member in that community? So how did you deal with that?
I mean, you have to just know it exists and just try your best and be real with yourself.
Yeah.
Be honest. Also, you have to commit every day. I mean, you have to set time to learn Torah every day. There's really a reason for that. If you don't, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna
100%.
It's like 100%. Plugging into the wall and getting power. You have to do that. That's our socket.
Right. When you start to understand the mitzvot as charges, really, to use that metaphor, they really are what energize our spiritual life, our spiritual vitality. If we're not committing ourselves, I'm going to keep Shabbos. I'm going to be eating kosher, right? I'm, family purity. I'm going to be saying my blessings. I'm going to have gratitude. Then it fades.
Right. Another thing is that when you're coming in, as a new sort of member of this different world, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
You hear of like sort of bickering between groups, right?
Yeah. Infighting.
Yeah. And so me coming in, I just didn't really understand it so much. I'm like, the Jewish people, we're trying to hang on with what we got. We're extremely influential people in all walks of life.
Yeah.
And like just to identify with Hashem and to do things lishma, like why are we fighting with each other? I just didn't really get it. So I sort of looked down on the fighting, and I didn't really get it so much. And I ended up finding a lot of good things in every group of people. And I'm like, I like this mixture of everything.
Yeah.
So I try to take things from everybody and bring that into my life.
And that's what happens when you actually start to meet people from each of these groups. Instead of just thinking about them as groups.
Yeah.
When you meet individuals, you're like, wait, there's so much warmth and love and honesty, and there's not as much hatred, as the narratives tend to make it sound like.
Yeah, like I need a little modernity here. I need a little Hasidish, neshama stuff going on here. I need some learning of Gemara and being grounded. Mix those all together, and you have a beautiful thing. So I didn't like that stuff so much. And there's a lot of divisiveness in those communities in Israel, like between each other, and like that was a lot to bear,
And so most people feel like it's much stronger of that contrast and that kind of struggle between groups, between labels in Israel than it is outside of the land, right?
For sure.
Why do you think that is? Why in Israel is it so like tribalistic, or the lines are so sharply drawn?
Yeah, I think people are like innately tribal, even if we think that that's something that's not
we are definitely
a common thing in the modern world. Yeah. It's true, we have our groups, we do. And it's good and it's bad. I'm saying like it's good to have that small group of chevra and people to lean on, to support with. But at the end of the day, we're not that much different from each other, know. And if we're trying to come together for Hashem, we got to just cut that out.
I think that's one of the things that, like in general in the Jewish world today, is like, thank God, moving in that direction where like, even things like, my wife is from Iran, her family comes from Iran. Like the chances of this, this pale Canadian kid, Jewish boy, ending up marrying someone from literally across the planet, right? Whose histories have not interacted with each other for 2,000 years. And then now we live in a world where like that's totally normal. And people barely blink an eye to hear something like that. There's this incredible like fusion of cultures, the resurgence of like neo-Hasidism today, and Breslov, and like how really mainstream these things have become. That everyone is learning Gemara Be'iyun, and that everybody is happy with Hasidut, and that the strong presence of Sephardic heritage and culture, and the openness to sing the songs and share the experiences and intermarry between one another. Those things weren't for granted back in the day.
I think it's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's an amazing thing. I think that those tribal divisions are sort of breaking down, and
it's interesting because there's definitely a balance in Orthodox thought, right, in traditional Torah thought, between that tribalistic aspect, the keeping a strong, tight-knit culture together, and making sure that everyone, in a sense, is conforming, but on the other hand, a marked individuality, and the kind of putting a serious focus on making sure that sense of selfhood and the uniqueness of the individual is never squashed. So there's something happening in our society today where things are coming back together. But as with everything, there's growing pains and there's discomfort and there's resistance on all those borders of the unknown. But it's a really positive step for that to be moving forward. Coming together. It's a beautiful thing. So I guess my follow-up question would be, coming in to Orthodoxy, as you were talking about before, getting used to the commitment to going to be keeping kosher, praying on a regular basis, and so on and so forth. Were there things that you discovered? I mean, for sure, because everyone part of living a Torah life is constant discovery. So we all discover new things every single day.
Sure.
What were some of the discoveries that you kind of stepped upon only after really throwing yourself into Orthodox life? Things that you hadn't even recognized or known about the beauty of before you kind of threw yourself into it. And the reason why I feel like it's a question there, because a lot of times there's that initial excitement that we have about Judaism, the first time that we're exposed, or any new set of ideas, and as you start to plumb to the depths of them, you discover these gems of kind of meaning that you never really get to know about from the outside in. So I'm wondering if there's any things like along your journey, 2, 3, 5, 10 years in to living this lifestyle, things that you now realize about Orthodox Judaism that maybe you didn't recognize until now, or took a lot longer to really discover. Anything in mind?
I think maybe initially, one of the things that was very compelling and really opened my mind to plunging in was how Orthodoxy really emphasized meaning in everything. You know, from relationships with your parents and how you talk to your parents, right? Kivud av v'em.
Yeah.
You know, and really living these things out was huge.
Right.
You know, and how you speak to your friends, how you speak to strangers. Like there's just there's like these guidelines for everything in life when it comes to Judaism, and it just infuses so much meaning into everything.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, you know, growing up in a largely secular lifestyle, a lot of things, you know, that kind of lose their meaning. You know, I mean, divorce rates in the secular world, they're massive. You know, people are having fewer kids. I mean, these relationships and the emphasis on having big families, these were massive things. Yeah. And huge for my sort of spiritual awakening to become.
And that's something that a lot of people have a hard time with at first, because Judaism does value every single moment, and it's like, you can't waste a second, right? You can't. You got to be doing it for something. There's a meaning here. There's a mitzvah. I'm either resting so that I can re-energize my body for the next day, or focusing on working on my anger because it's part of my avodas Hashem. Every single waking moment has something that can be achieved, and for a lot of people from the outside, they look at it as prohibitions, limitations,
for sure.
Commandments. Which is a word that probably gives off the wrong
anti-science and things
today.
like that.
Yeah,
it's just totally not.
So it's interesting that to you that was something that was compelling, right? They said, "Wow, okay, this doesn't just mean that there's a lot of responsibilities. It means that life is packed
It's to not
with
be to not be a robot. You know what I mean? Not to just go through things and through life, not thinking deeply into things. The fact that you make a bracha before you eat, like you're stopping to recognize that we live in a world where I, have amazing food in front of my face right now, and I can, indulge whenever. But to stop and say, okay, I need to thank Hashem for the ability to be able to do this. It's unbelievable. It's infusing meaning and then into your kids, showing them the importance of that. Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's really there's no other religion that has such detail. Right? They used to call Judaism a kitchen religion. Because there's 1,000 laws to how you're supposed to cook an egg in your kitchen. It's like an unbelievable amount of complexity and detail. And it used to be something that people mock. Where I think that today we're coming around and realizing that there's so much sophistication. We need that meaning, and especially because we live in such a fast-paced era.
You have access to any information you want,
seconds,
whenever you want.
Right. We recognize now that that time really matters, and you can pack meaning into 5 seconds. Right. Every advertising company knows this. All of social media is built on this idea that you can pack meaning into 5 seconds, and you can grab someone's attention and speak directly to them in a compelling way. Yeah. And the concept that God would view the value of our time at an even higher level than that shouldn't come as such a surprise to today's world, right? Yeah. The way that Hashem sees it is that you could really maximize your life if you would just tap into what every second has to offer. Yeah. There's something real that you can cut. Right. You're not going to touch into it, so you'll miss an opportunity. But to view it as an opportunity is it's really one of those revolutionary contributions of Judaism.
Yeah, like when I first started becoming religious, friends and family were like, why would you want to, limit yourself so much? Right. You need limits, you know what I mean? Otherwise, there's no barriers and anything goes. You start to, you lose meaning in so many things. And you can speak to people, that have gone through life, maybe not living this lifestyle, and they're searching for meaning. I'm not saying that I'm not struggling to find meaning with everything, because we still are. We're people. Yeah. But people need meaning. They need a reason to.
It's definitely true that Torah on its own doesn't solve everyone's existential crisis. Right? We shouldn't relate to Torah that way. But as a framework for general growth for an individual, for society, for building a nation.
We have a good track record.
We have a great track record, and it's one heck of a good start. Towards solving that the yearning, the deep human desire for meaning. Yeah, it definitely gets you well along that journey. But you might need to fill in some of the gaps. Yeah, with any sort of assistance that a person needs, right? And I think that's. I really don't think that there's first of all, a shame in saying something like that, but I think it's really built into the whole idea of Jewish thought and practice of derech eretz, that a person needs to develop their character, a person needs to develop their inner life. And it's not something that's beyond it, and it requires, like in the Musar movement, it required, really being open and vulnerable about one's growth process, discussing it with a Rebbe, with a Chaver, and building plans for continued success in your growth. Cheshbon hanefesh, right? Yeah. Keeping a toll what's going on in your life and making sure that you're following every last influence and impact and effect and choice that you make.
Sure.
There's an amazing amount of detail there as well. So it's amazing that that's translated not only in the thought of Torah, but really in the action, the way that you live a Torah lifestyle.
Yeah.
Is by focusing those efforts to maximize our moments.
Right. I think also like legacy, right? Like ties into what is your legacy going to be? What do you want to be remembered for?
Yeah.
You know, and the Jewish people, we have a pretty amazing legacy.
Yeah.
And to be able to plug into that is very inspiring and amazing. Right. I think one of the first things that also like sparked my journey into Judaism on that trip in New York City, one of the first things we had to do was write our own obituary, and that was just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
It's like looking back in the past 5 years in college.
Yeah.
What do I want to be remembered for? So quickly saw that maybe I want to change.
Were I proud of?
I think I want to change some of those, behaviors and create a new sort of future.
Right.
Don't leave back the past, but synthesize it together.
Yeah.
But create a future that was rooted in something to be proud of as a legacy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. So, I mean, I think it's an amazing journey. For me, when I think about these type of stories, like, for as many people as there are who travel this road, right,
sure.
and really get streamlined, there's obviously dozens who don't. What do you think it is about success within going through this process, like, witnessing the culture, the experience of Torah, and actually throwing yourself into it and saying, you know what, I got to commit to this? Is it an honesty? Is it a vulnerability? What is it about those people who go through the program but don't remain unchanged? They actually make that difference in their life and begin.
You're saying people that go through a similar program, commit, but then kind of fall out of it later?
Yeah, there's so many who do, right? For as many that stay strong to the path, way more head off. What do you think the difference is?
I mean, the pressures of modern life, right? The fast-paced, the being pulled in so many directions with information, advertisements, it's very overwhelming. I think the key to success for someone who's coming back, in integrating these things into their regular sort of newfound life to hold on to it, is to have a very healthy community around them. It's also supportive of that. Right. Because then you make bonds and you help each other out. And I think that's a major
infrastructure
factor.
Is key.
Yes.
Yeah.
If someone has spent a significant amount of time learning and becoming religious, and then they just go back to, let's say, their hometown with no real infrastructure or married or anything that's promoting that, I think it's only a matter of time until they fall out. Yeah,
and that's very, true to the Torah concept that a person really needs to live within a community, right? Yeah. As Judaism is not a religion of individuals, right?
Right, that's important.
We're a people.
Community.
Right? Community is absolutely vital. To the extent that the Rambam writes, he lists a whole series of Jewish people that can lose their portion in the world to come. That certain behaviors, certain beliefs, convictions can almost excise a person from the collective soul of the people. And one of the things on that list is a person who doesn't almost share the burden with the tzibur, with the congregation, when they're going through hardship. So there's a plague, hitting the community, but you've got a stockpile of food, so you don't go pray with the community. You don't feel that collective responsibility. Wow. Loses their portion in the world to come. Wow. Right? Well, I'm a good Jew. I pray every day. I put on tefillin. I study 6 hours of Torah every day. No portion in the world to come. Because so much of what it means to be a member of Israel is identifying with our people. Right? We're a religion of nation, right? Rather than solely as individuals. We all have our own individual roles to play. Right. But if we don't identify with the people, we're missing something absolutely vital, right? So heading back to your hometown in the middle of nowhere, where the nearest Jew is a Chabad house 3 hours away, that's definitely not setting you up for success. So here's, I guess, my follow-up question, kind of transitioning back to your story, right? Yeah. So you're in Israel, you're married, you're doing things with Bizrael. How did you end up back in Columbus, Ohio? I mean, this is where you started. You're on this journey, on this spiritual reawakening, and all of a sudden, now you live in Columbus. What happened? Yeah. Bring us from A to Z.
I never thought I'd move back to the States. I thought it was in Israel.
I mean, you made Aliyah.
Yeah. I thought that was,
So what happened?
Okay, great. So I was doing the Bizrael, the business program. I had just been married. We were about to have our first kid, living in Jerusalem. So I got back together with my partner Binyamin, if you remember.
Sure.
He was living in Israel, right?
Yeah.
And we decided to lean back into the college business community vibe, like that whole that market. And I noticed that there was a gap when I was in college. There was no place to find a place to live, right? It was like Craigslist, which was kind of not such a good experience trying to find. Oh, you had like these massive paper lists. You had to walk around campus.
Wow.
So we built like a Zillow copy in a sense.
Yeah.
Like we took that idea and then populated it with properties, and then we brought people to that, and we launched that on the same campuses from that original business back in the day. And we ended up raising some money in Israel to build a team. We had an office in Jerusalem, and we had a sales office in Jerusalem for selling ads and things like that. And we had people coming to the site, and we were getting leases signed. It was exciting. So I was like really jumping into that Startup Nation vibe that I really wanted to do. And then I came back, I forget what year, maybe in 15.
Okay.
2015. I came back originally just me, and my family stayed in Jerusalem. I came back for a few weeks just to set things up for the fall, for the launch in the fall when the kids come back to school.
Yeah.
And so that went well, and I had some good relationships, and I was traveling around to these campuses, setting up different things, staying at my parents in Columbus. And then my wife came. We might stay here a little bit longer. So then I brought my wife and my son back to here. We were working on it for a while, and then that business kind of just went kaput. Whatever, some things happen. That's what happens. You know what I mean?
Not such a happy ending.
You know.
But at that point, you were
sometimes it is
kind of just here.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're living at your parents. At a certain point, you must decide it's time to
for
get
like
our own
3
place.
months, we were living at my parents. My wife was pregnant with our second child at this time.
Oh man, yeah, that's a great time to live with the folks.
She was a real trooper there, you know. Wow, yeah, she was a big trooper.
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020.
And so, what was the state of Columbus, Ohio, at this time? Right, you show up here. You're living at your parents. You're not living in Berwick, right? It's the neighborhood that we live in today.
Right.
So how do you end up? You know, because you were just speaking about the importance of Jewish community and infrastructure.
Right, this is supposed to be temporary.
And now you're in the middle of nowhere. Right?
We weren't even in Bexley. I grew up in Bexley, but my parents moved out to like New Albany, Westerville. It's called Little Turtle.
Okay.
Which is really far away from the shuls here. I used to come to Beth Jacob every now and then and daven here in the morning. Yeah. We spent a lot of time at the Chabad in New Albany with Rabbi Kaltman for Shabbos.
Yeah. Wow.
Because it was near my parents' house.
Beautiful.
And I think at one of his daughter's weddings, I met Rabbi Goldstein, and he gave me the pitch.
Incredible.
We got this going on.
So Rabbi Goldstein, right, moved to Columbus about 8 years ago now?
Maybe
Is it
10,
about 8
I'm not
years?
sure. Yeah.
Around 8, 9 years?
Yeah.
And he's completely revolutionized the Columbus Jewish community.
He's good,
right?
yeah.
That's not an overstatement.
Incredible.
I mean, completely brought new life, new young families to the Berwick community, has done an incredible amount of growth for the membership in Beth Jacob. We've done a number of renovations, and I think there might be something else coming up soon.
Ooh,
but also, just building out the studio, there's been an incredible amount of really cutting-edge development for the Jewish community.
A real sense of...
Really brought life back to the Columbus Jewish community. And so at the time, he must have been right at the beginning of this endeavor,
I think there was
bringing young couples.
You had I think Steven Stieglitz, they were here, and Danny and Valerie were here.
Shout out to all the originals.
And the Savages were here, and I think Shimon was here. If I'm missing anybody, I'm sorry. So I met everybody, and it was great. We had Shabbos here. Just keep in mind, so I grew up in Bexley, right?
Yeah.
My grandparents and my dad and my great-grandparents went to Beth Jacob.
It's incredible.
So I had these childhood memories of running around the staircase, the spiral, antique staircase right there, getting stuck. I remember, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I'd be living in Berwick.
Right, raising your own kids.
Yeah.
Running up that dangerous spiral staircase.
Exactly. But I was in a transition again in my life. At business I was working on had died. And I like to be at the start of new things that I believe in. And so I got that vibe from Rabbi Goldstein and the rest of the guys that were here. And so we decided to, plug back into my roots a bit. And my wife ended up falling in love with Columbus.
Wow.
Now we live down the street, we have a few kids.
Yeah.
And
it's an incredible story. I love how you just said, getting in at the beginning of things that you really believe in. because that's the common denominator here between your entrepreneurial drive and your interest, and thank God, continual success in all those endeavors, and investing in a community like Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, and you get the ability to be at the beginning to really, and it helps shape the trajectory.
Yeah, and we constantly have conversations about the future of Columbus and certain topics which maybe aren't accessible for a larger audience, but there's so much about a young community like this where you really get to be one of the people shaping the future.
Yeah.
And if you have that vision and you have that passion, then your voice can really be heard.
Yeah, it's to be a part of something like that is it's worth the sacrifice of like having a million restaurants and having this and that. I mean, we have a great group of friends, learning, growing. I really feel like I've had some of my best growth being here. Yeah. Being surrounded by the group we've built.
Yeah.
And thank God it's good. It's been very good.
Yeah. I mean, thank God. I agree with you 100%. We really have something truly unparalleled, right? For better or for worse, there's obviously every place has their own unique thing.
Nothing's ever perfect.
But there's something very unique about the vibe that we have going on here, particularly in the young Jewish community in Berwick. That first of all is a tribute to Rabbi Goldstein's amazing work that he's done for Columbus, but also I think really provides a lot of that infrastructure that you don't get in smaller Jewish communities around the country. Where you would need so much more. I mean, you go to places like New York, to Miami, to larger Jewish communities, even places like Cleveland. Sure. They have so much infrastructure, but the sense of a closeness and a camaraderie and an interest in investing, a feeling that you can make a difference within the Jewish community, they've managed to really keep that feeling alive here, even as it's been growing over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing thing. So you were really one of that first group of young couples here living in Berwick, and since then, we've grown. I don't know how many families we have here now.
I don't know,
but definitely a nice group, very positive representation of what will come, and it's really all in tribute to those type of moves. So today, you are still an entrepreneur, right? Still hustling, still innovating.
I've gotten the vibes down a little bit. I've learned the things. Learned some hard lessons and some good lessons.
Yeah. And so what are you currently involved in? What's your big project? What's your big future vision for bringing entrepreneurial creativity into your life here in Columbus?
I mean, I think we're in history, we're at like a time in history that it's never been easier to build a business or to build sort of that lifestyle that you want to create. Yeah. Outside of the normal 9 to 5, if that's the way you want to go, there's never been such an opportunity to do that. To build a business, the internet has just removed all barriers to entry. And so I'm currently in e-commerce, building direct-to-consumer brands, across the internet, using social media, different marketplaces, and thank God we've been able to build it up to a very nice size, and it's been empowering and really amazing. And I get a lot of pleasure of sharing the experiences and hopefully bringing people to the place where they want to try it by themselves. Right. And get over some of those fears, and because I've been through it, Yeah. So, it's quite amazing what you can do nowadays. And I feel like we're at a very special point in history. Yeah.
And the ability for someone who wants to live like an observant lifestyle, to work on their own schedule and to, be their own boss and be able to build a lifestyle around Torah while still being able to run a successful business, right? That was some of your first inspiration, and that's something that you're really trying to continue doing today.
Yeah, I mean, you have the ability to really design your own lifestyle nowadays, you know, and to be able to get to want to build it around Torah values, because I believe you're in a space, a lot of people, where they can actually design their lifestyle, especially in a post-pandemic world where a lot of work has been moved online. Right. You don't need that office 9 to 5 lifestyle. Yeah. You can start to have a lot more flexibility. Right. But that, that want and that sort of need that you've created for yourself to do it around Torah values is massive. And I think we're in a time where it's like going to get easier. Yeah. And but when things get easier, sometimes they lack meaning. Yeah. So I think building it around Torah values can help supplement the meaning.
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of ensure that balance.
Yeah.
Make sure that as things speed up and things become easier, more simpler to automate and to regulate, without really having to lift a finger, realizing that now you have more time on your hands means that now you have more opportunity to...
More responsibility, too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you got to, you have to take care of your body. You got to exercise. You got to take care of your family. You have to learn Torah. Otherwise, again, you're going to fall out of it.
Yeah.
And you have to be involved in the community as much as you can.
Yeah.
If you don't continue to push yourself, as 10, 20, who knows what our kids are going to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
A lot of industries are changing rapidly.
Yeah.
College and universities and schools are they're operating on sort of, I think, an older
right. And
model.
Our children need to know that there are certain things that need to be prioritized above all.
Yeah.
Right? Self-health, self-maintenance, and commitment to family, commitment to community, commitment to Jewish identity, to supporting Israel. Right? Those are things that no matter what type of schedule you're maintaining, you have to keep true as part of that, our commitment to our future, that promise that we are, as I quoted Rabbi Sachs earlier in the episode, he talks about this letter in the scroll, that each individual is another letter within the story that's been written for 4,000 years, the story of Israel, and it's our job to give over those core values to the next generation and give them the pen to write their own letter into the scroll of Torah.
I mean, as we move as a world into like sort of this new sort of reality, sort of to a new information age, and things really speeding up. Yeah, it's going to be very exciting to see the Jewish sort of impact and how that carries in and how that guides that, and how we have a chance to be a part of that.
Yeah. And B'ezrat Hashem, each one of us, as we play that role, if we do it with that sincerity, right, and every day we don't forget to ask Hashem to support us along that journey, right, to recognize that it's difficult, going out into the world, maintaining a sheer and undying commitment to finding meaning in life, and at the same time focusing in on that spreadsheet, and punching those numbers. You have to pray, with sincerity and compassion for mercy, for assistance, for the Almighty to be on our side, to help us along that the path, and to navigate it successfully and be successful in both areas.
Yeah, I didn't speak enough about the importance of praying.
It's vital.
It's like you don't.
Quick note to the audience: it's critical.
When I grew up, I never thought about praying growing up. Praying was like Yom Kippur. My experience with praying was like Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, right?
And like, what a more uplifting time to identify with your praying. But you really need to pray and to understand that it's not just about you, and that Hashem is here, and it's way bigger than you.
Right, being a team player, the Almighty. Right.
There you go.
Realize
I like that.
It's the two of you together that are going to make this work, right? We need health, we need sustenance, parnasah, we need forgiveness. There's always things to be growing and things that we need to continue fighting for, and dreams that we can never give up on as Jewish people of Yerushalayim Ircha B'Rachamim Tashuv. That every family, ultimately, you guys already began that story. You've already had that first chapter in the Shiva to Yerushalayim and returning back home. But it's ultimately all of us can never give up on that dream and that vision and the hope.
We're going to get back there.
That we're getting back. We're getting back. Far Columbus, 2021. We'll be there, guys. It's not too late for Pesach in Yerushalayim this year. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be together. Our families join together on a chabura. Those of us who are finishing Maseches Pesachim, Mazel Tov to all of you. And Zocha, this Pesach, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's Yeshuat Hashem keheref ayin. The salvation of God is in the blink of an eye. So B'ezrat Hashem will be, roasting our Korban Pesach together this year.
So
barbecue it up at the temple. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode. Until next time, I'm Chaim Davies, and this is the Chaim Davies Show.